Talk to my deaf daughter. The billionaire bellowed, his arrogance vibrating through the very crystal of Le Fleur, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. William Blackstone, a titan of real estate and renowned for his ruthless dealings, rose from his velvet-roped VIP booth, a glint of cruel amusement in his eyes. He pointed a manicured finger at the young girl, no older than 16, who sat beside him, her face a mask of silent pleading. If you can hold a meaningful conversation with her, a conversation she enjoys, I'll pay you $50,000, cash, and hand you a contract to work in any of my establishments, in any role you desire. Name your price. The black waitress, Kesha Williams, her hands already burdened with a tray laden with impossibly delicate glassware, froze. The low hum of polite conversation died instantly, replaced by the uncomfortable rustle of silk and the click of judgmental glances. Every patron in the dimly lit, gilded room swiveled to observe the unfolding spectacle. At 28, Kesha had navigated her share of awkward shifts, but nothing, not even the spilled champagne on designer dresses, had prepared her for this. But when you fail, Blackstone continued, his voice a low menacing purr, and you will fail, you will admit, publicly, for everyone in this room to witness, that sign language is a crutch, a solution for losers who can't afford the real fixes, the implants, the therapies, the specialized attention. He paused, letting the full weight of his contempt hang in the air. A harsh, grating laugh ripped through the tense silence. And of course, he added with a final venomous twist, you'll be fired on the spot. Consider it a lesson in overreach. His daughter, Emma, sat motionless, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. Her hands, delicate and expressive, danced in a frantic flurry of silent pleas. Please stop this, Daddy. She doesn't deserve this. I don't deserve this. Her fingers blurred, a desperate ballet of unspoken words. Blackstone, however, remained unmoved, his attention solely fixed on Kesha. Kesha watched the young girl's silent anguish, and something shifted within her. She was no longer the invisible server, expertly balancing trays of overpriced cocktails and feigning deafness to the casual cruelty of the elite. For 5 years, she had meticulously cleaned these very tables, endured casual racist remarks masked as jokes, and silently swallowed her pride as men like Blackstone used their vast wealth to diminish those they deemed beneath them. But tonight something had broken. I accept your challenge, Mr. Blackstone, Kesha declared, her voice surprisingly calm, unwavering, and carrying clearly through the hushed room. A cold smile, predatory and satisfied, stretched across Blackstone's face. He believed he had found his evening's entertainment, another soul to crush under the weight of his wealth and power. He had no idea that he had just ignited a fire that should have remained dormant. Kesha walked towards Emma, her gait steady and purposeful. She began to sign, her movements fluid and graceful, each gesture precise and deliberate. Her facial expressions mirrored the nuances of her words, conveying a warmth and understanding that resonated far beyond the silent language. Hi, Emma. My name is Kesha. You're not alone tonight. Emma's eyes widened in stunned disbelief. Before the expectant gazes of the assembled elite, Kesha held a secret, a hidden skill that was about to rewrite the narrative of what was supposed to be the most humiliating night of William Blackstone's life. If you are wondering how a seemingly ordinary waitress acquired fluency in the very language a billionaire so despised, then buckle up. This story of pride, prejudice, and the unexpected power of empathy has only just begun. The twist that awaits will leave you speechless. William Blackstone hadn't amassed his $3.2 billion real estate empire through acts of kindness. His fortune was built on the foundations of evicted families, fractured neighborhoods, and crushed dreams. He saw sentimentality as a weakness, empathy as a liability. And now, as he observed a black waitress communicating effortlessly with his defective daughter, as he so callously thought of her, he experienced the sensation he loathed above all others, a loss of control. Those are just basic gestures, he muttered dismissively to his dinner companions, the billionaire Peterson couple and Senator Mitchell, all of whom were watching the unfolding drama with growing fascination, their appetites for gossip thoroughly piqued. Anyone can memorize a few hand signs, but inside William was seething. For 16 years, ever since the day Emma was born deaf, he had relentlessly pursued a cure, pouring millions into cochlear implants, experimental gene therapies, and exclusive Swiss treatments, all driven by his desperate desire to erase what he perceived as a shameful imperfection in his otherwise pristine bloodline. He had tried to brute force a fix to something that wasn't broken, blinded by his own arrogance and inability to accept his daughter for who she was. He noticed something that chilled him to the bone. Emma had never smiled so genuinely in his presence. Her hands moved with increasing speed and enthusiasm as she described to Kesha her passion for art, the hidden books she devoured in secret, and the ASL videos she binged on YouTube whenever her father was safely out of sight. For 5 precious minutes, she was simply a normal girl, liberated from the crushing weight of her father's expectations, connecting with someone who truly saw her, understood her, and valued her for who she was, not for what she lacked. Daddy never lets me use sign language in public, Emma signed, her tears glistening anew, this time tinged with a fragile hope. He says it makes our family look weak, like we can't afford to fix the problem. Kesha felt a familiar surge of anger simmering in her chest. For 5 long years at the Golden Crown, she had observed the quiet, insidious cruelty of the wealthy white elite, the condescending comments about her exotic braids, the surprised remarks about how well-spoken she was for someone like her, the way certain guests treated her as if she were a piece of the furniture rather than a living, breathing human being. William suddenly stood, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. Enough of this nonsense, Emma. You have 5 minutes to wrap up this little performance, and then we are leaving. His words sliced through the air like a razor-sharp blade. He fixed Kesha with a menacing stare. And you, stop filling my daughter's head with these foolish ideas about acceptance. She doesn't need to accept anything. She needs to overcome, to conquer. That was the moment Kesha did something no employee had ever dared to do in William Blackstone's formidable presence. She met his gaze directly, unflinchingly, without a trace of fear or apology. She signed to Emma, simultaneously translating aloud. Tell your father that the only thing you need to overcome is the shame he feels for you. The restaurant froze. Waiters stopped mid-stride, their trays rattling precariously. Guests craned their necks, their conversations abruptly silenced. Time itself seemed to pause as a black waitress dared to challenge one of the most powerful men in America. William Blackstone had humiliated senators, bankrupted rival businessmen, and brought governors to their knees. But never, in all his years of wielding power, had a mere employee dared to look him in the eye and fight back. His face darkened, flushing crimson with a mixture of fury and something far more unsettling, a flicker of morbid curiosity. Do you even know who you're challenging? He demanded, his voice low and dangerously sharp. I own this restaurant. I own the building. I own half this block. With 1 phone call, I can ensure you never work in Manhattan again. With 2, I can make your life a living hell. Kesha didn't flinch, but her eyes underwent a subtle transformation. The polite, deferential demeanor vanished, replaced by a calm, unwavering strength. It was the look of someone who had weathered far worse storms and emerged not only unscathed but empowered. Mr. Blackstone, she said softly, her voice laced with an undercurrent of steel. You may own many things, but you do not own the right to diminish your daughter's spirit. Emma stared at Kesha, her expression a mixture of terror and awe. No one had ever stood up for her like this before, and she had certainly never witnessed her father looking so unsure. What William didn't know was that every insult he hurled, every threat he made, only confirmed what Kesha had suspected since her first day at the Golden Crown. He had vastly underestimated her. Everyone thought this was the end of her career, that she had been too brazen for her own good. But they were about to discover that some people carry secrets powerful enough to shake empires. Behind the opulent facade of the restaurant, Kesha found Emma huddled in the restroom, sobbing silently. Her tears weren't solely from sadness. They were a complex cocktail of shame, anger, and something entirely new, hope. No one has ever stood up for me like that, Emma signed, her fingers trembling slightly as Kesha entered the room. Is my father right? Am I really just an embarrassment to the family? A problem that needs fixing? Kesha knelt beside her, her hands moving with practiced grace, each sign imbued with empathy and genuine care. Your deafness isn't a flaw, Emma, she signed. It's an integral part of who you are, and who you are is extraordinary. You are intelligent, creative, and fiercely independent. Never let anyone, especially not your father, make you believe otherwise. What Emma didn't know was that Kesha had grown up with a deaf younger sister in the heart of Detroit. For 15 years, she had straddled 2 distinct worlds, the hearing and the silent. She wasn't merely fluent in sign language. She had once been the president of the Deaf Student Association at Howard University, where she had pursued her passion for psychology with a specialized focus on disability advocacy and the intersection of law and accessibility. But that was before everything irrevocably changed. Before the tragic accident. Before her sister Ashley passed away in a hospital that lacked a qualified interpreter during a critical medical emergency. Before Kesha uncovered the truth that had been meticulously concealed beneath layers of money and powerful lawyers. Before she sacrificed everything to fight a system rigged to protect the wealthy and privileged. Miss Williams, the shrill, imperious voice of Margaret Thornfield, the perpetually flustered restaurant manager, echoed down the hallway, shattering the fragile intimacy of the moment. Mr. Blackstone is demanding your presence immediately, and I would strongly suggest you offer him a sincere apology if you wish to retain your employment. Kesha rose slowly, her expression resolute, but not before signing something to Emma that caused the young girl's eyes to widen in surprise and burgeoning excitement. Trust me, Kesha signed with a confident smile. Your father is about to receive a lesson he should have learned a long time ago. When they re-emerged into the main dining area, William had assembled his usual coterie of sycophantic admirers. His elite friends, Senator Mitchell, renowned for his xenophobic anti-immigration rhetoric, the Petersons, who had amassed their vast fortune by exploiting vulnerable immigrant workers, and 3 other men whose names were whispered in hushed tones, individuals who treated people as disposable tools in their relentless pursuit of power and profit. Ah, the star of the evening has returned, William said mockingly, gesturing for Kesha to approach with a dismissive wave of his hand. I trust you have had ample time to reflect upon your precarious position? But William failed to realize that while he had been reveling in his self-assured superiority, Kesha had discreetly sent a text message to a number she hadn't used in nearly 2 years. The reply arrived almost instantaneously, vibrating with unspoken meaning. I'm on my way. Time to reveal your true identity. Mr. Blackstone, Kesha began, her voice calm and measured, belying the storm raging within her. I would like to propose a counteroffer. The assembled table erupted in derisive laughter. A black waitress daring to make a counteroffer to one of America's wealthiest men? The notion was utterly ludicrous, a comedic interlude in their otherwise predictable evening. How utterly adorable, Mrs. Peterson chuckled, dabbing at her lips with a silk napkin. William, darling, your staff truly doesn't seem to comprehend their place in the social hierarchy. Do they? Kesha ignored her blatant condescension. If you are so confident in your belief that individuals like myself are inherently inferior, she continued, her voice unwavering, then let's elevate the stakes. I propose we double the original bet to $100,000. The laughter ceased abruptly. The room fell silent, the air thick with disbelief. William blinked, momentarily taken aback by her audacity. You don't possess $100,000 to wager, sweetheart, he scoffed. You're a waitress, barely scraping by, I presume. That is correct, Kesha conceded, a faint smile playing on her lips. But I happen to know someone who does, and he derives immense pleasure from humbling arrogant individuals who underestimate the capabilities of others. At that precise moment, the heavy doors to the Golden Crown swung open with a dramatic flourish. Every head in the room swiveled in unison, their gazes drawn to the commanding figure who strode purposefully into the room. It was a man whose very name sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened power brokers. Dr. Marcus Jefferson, one of the most formidable and widely respected civil rights attorneys in the country, advanced towards the table with an aura of quiet authority, his presence radiating power and unwavering resolve. William knew him well. Jefferson had recently cost one of his closest associates a staggering $80 million in a landmark discrimination lawsuit, a case that had sent shockwaves through the upper echelons of New York society and exposed the deep-seated prejudices lurking beneath the veneer of philanthropy. Kesha? Dr. Jefferson greeted warmly, embracing her like a cherished old friend. My apologies for the tardiness. The traffic on the FDR Drive was utterly brutal. He turned his attention to the assembled group, his smile polite but razor-sharp, hinting at the steel that lay beneath the surface. I sincerely hope I am not intruding upon anything of significance. Marcus, Kesha replied, her voice now devoid of any trace of timidity or subservience. William subtly noticed something that sent a jolt of unease through him. The deferential waitress act had completely vanished, replaced by an air of quiet confidence and unwavering determination. I was merely elucidating the details of our little wager to Mr. Blackstone. Dr. Jefferson smoothly pulled up an unoccupied chair and seated himself without invitation, his movements deliberate and exuding an unspoken sense of command. The seemingly insignificant gesture alone caused several of the men present to shift uncomfortably in their seats, their carefully constructed facades of composure beginning to crack. Ah yes, he said smoothly, his voice dripping with subtle sarcasm. Mr. Blackstone's renowned hospitality. I've heard so much about it. William felt a chill creep up his spine, despite the warm temperature of the room. There was something in the way Dr. Jefferson emphasized the word heard, a calm, knowing tone that implied he possessed far more knowledge than he outwardly displayed. I can scarcely believe that we haven't had the pleasure of crossing paths previously, William said, forcing a cordial smile and extending his hand in a gesture of strained politeness. Dr. Marcus Jefferson, the man replied, accepting the handshake firmly, his grip conveying both strength and unwavering resolve. Jefferson and Associates. We specialize in cases involving discrimination, workplace harassment, and civil rights violations, with a particular emphasis on holding accountable those corporations that mistakenly believe their wealth renders them untouchable. The word struck William like a blast of Arctic air, chilling him to the very core. For years, he had meticulously cultivated a carefully crafted public image as a benevolent philanthropist, generously donating to various charitable causes, all while diligently concealing the darker, more ruthless aspects of his empire. The absolute last thing he needed was a high-profile civil rights attorney snooping around his business dealings, unearthing the skeletons he had so carefully concealed. What an utterly delightful coincidence. Mrs. Peterson interjected, her voice trembling ever so slightly. Perhaps we should. Oh, please, do not allow me to disrupt your gathering. Dr. Jefferson smoothly interrupted, his tone gentle but undeniably dangerous. I am exceedingly interested in observing firsthand how exceptionally powerful individuals treat those they perceive to be beneath them. Can be quite educational. Kesha turned her attention to Emma, who was observing the unfolding scene with wide, fascinated eyes, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Emma, she said, signing gracefully as she spoke aloud. Your father seems particularly eager to demonstrate his views regarding sign language. Let us afford him that opportunity, shall we? The atmosphere in the room grew palpably heavier, charged with unspoken tension. Everyone present now understood that this was far more than a mere disagreement between an employer and his employee. This was a battle of ideologies, a clash between two fundamentally different worlds. One governed by unchecked wealth and blatant arrogance, the other fueled by unwavering truth and a profound sense of purpose. And Kesha Williams, the unassuming waitress whom everyone had dismissed as disposable, was poised to unveil her true identity, to expose the rot that had festered beneath the glittering facade of the Golden Crown. But first, she needed William to further entrench himself, to dig his own grave a little deeper, because some lessons can only be truly absorbed through experiencing profound loss, and some men must lose everything before they can comprehend the true meaning of dignity. Dr. Jefferson, William said finally, attempting to regain his composure and resurrect his carefully rehearsed charm. What an unexpected pleasure. I was completely unaware that you were acquainted with our employee. Oh, I have known Kesha for quite some time, Jefferson replied, casually extracting his smartphone from his pocket and placing it on the table, the red recording light blinking innocuously. In fact, she is one of the most extraordinarily talented legal minds I have ever had the distinct honor of working alongside. The words landed like a thunderbolt, shattering the carefully constructed illusion of normalcy. The room plunged into complete silence, every eye riveted on Kesha. William blinked in utter disbelief, his face a mask of shock and confusion. A lawyer? That's utterly impossible. She's a waitress. Just a waitress. Was a waitress? Kesha corrected calmly, removing her apron with a deliberate flourish, revealing a sharp, impeccably tailored black blazer beneath. Dr. Kesha Williams, Harvard Law School graduate, specializing in civil rights law and workplace discrimination. And for the past 5 years, I have been operating undercover here at the Golden Crown, meticulously documenting every illegal and unethical activity that occurs beneath your roof. William's face drained of all color, turning a ghastly shade of gray. The Petersons exchanged furtive, nervous glances, their earlier smugness replaced by palpable fear. Senator Mitchell slumped deeper into his chair, his complexion ashen, appearing as fragile as aged marble. Emma, still seated, stared in wide-eyed astonishment, realizing that she was witnessing a pivotal moment in history, the unraveling of a carefully constructed lie. Over the course of these 5 years, Kesha continued, retrieving a sleek tablet from her designer handbag, I have documented 847 instances of racial discrimination, 312 egregious labor violations, 156 sexually inappropriate comments directed at female staff, and 89 cases of blatant harassment based on prejudice, disability, and sexual orientation. She swiped across the screen, displaying a series of meticulously organized files, each one a damning indictment of William Blackstone's empire. Her voice remained steady and controlled, devoid of any hint of malice, but filled with the unwavering resolve of someone who had dedicated years to uncovering the truth. All meticulously recorded, accurately time-stamped, and corroborated by multiple witnesses. You can't. William stammered, his carefully cultivated facade of control beginning to crumble. That's illegal. You can't do that. Actually, Dr. Jefferson interjected with a sharp, predatory smile. In the state of New York, only one party needs to consent to a recording for it to be admissible as evidence. And given that Dr. Williams was your employee, she possessed every legal right to document any and all criminal behavior that transpired within the confines of her workplace. Kesha tapped the tablet once more. A recording began to play, its amplified sound echoing ominously through the silent restaurant. It was William's own voice, unmistakable in its arrogance and condescension, filling the air with his venomous words. Obviously, we can't hire any more of these people, he said, the contempt dripping from his voice. We already have far too many black employees in the kitchen. The customers are beginning to notice. It's bad for business. This conversation was recorded 18 months ago, during a manager's meeting where you explicitly discussed your discriminatory hiring policies and your deliberate efforts to maintain a predominantly white workforce, Kesha explained calmly. William leaped to his feet, his chair crashing to the floor with a resounding thud. Margaret, he roared, his face contorted with rage. Margaret, summon security immediately. This woman is attempting to extort us. Actually, Mr. Blackstone, came a firm, unwavering voice from the back of the room. Every head turned. Margaret Thornfield, the perpetually flustered restaurant manager, stepped forward, her demeanor transformed from nervous to commanding. But she wasn't alone. Flanking her were 2 individuals in impeccably tailored dark suits, each flashing a gleaming badge. I am Agent Thornfield, with the FBI's Hate Crimes Division, she announced, her voice ringing with authority. I have been operating undercover here for the past 3 years, working in close collaboration with Dr. Williams. The remaining vestiges of color completely drained from William's face, leaving him ashen and trembling. His world, his carefully constructed empire of control, was shattering before his very eyes. Not 1, but 2 federal agents had been embedded within his organization for years, meticulously gathering evidence of his crimes. Throughout the course of our investigation, Agent Thornfield continued, her voice unwavering, we have uncovered a consistent pattern of systemic racial discrimination, unequal pay scales based on race and gender, and something far more insidious. A clandestine communication network among elite restaurants sharing blacklists of non-white employees who dared to speak out against injustice. She produced a thick stack of documents from her briefcase and placed them on the table with a resounding thud, the weight of the evidence crushing William's spirit. These documents contain irrefutable email correspondence between you and other prominent business owners, Mr. Blackstone. Agent Thornfield continued coldly. Messages in which you colluded to ensure that certain problematic employees, typically those who dared to report discriminatory practices, would be effectively barred from ever securing employment again in the city. Emma's eyes widened, her gaze fixed on her father with a mixture of shock, confusion, and a dawning sense of understanding. For the first time in her 16 years, she was witnessing her father without his carefully constructed mask, stripped bare of his power and influence, exposed for the cruel and calculating man he truly was. The once untouchable William Blackstone, the titan of industry, was finally being held accountable for his actions. His carefully crafted illusion of benevolence irrevocably shattered. And there's more, Kesha added, connecting her smartphone to a small, portable speaker. Mr. Blackstone, do you recognize this conversation? A new recording commenced, its sound amplified and echoing throughout the hushed restaurant, causing every patron to fall silent and listen intently. It was William's voice, loud, slurred, and dripping with arrogance, recorded at a private party 6 months prior. The fundamental problem with these people, he slurred, is that they simply don't understand their place. You grant a black person a single opportunity, and they immediately assume they deserve the same rights as us. That's precisely why I make certain to consistently remind them that they are entirely replaceable. Turn that off immediately, William roared, lunging forward in a desperate attempt to seize the phone. But Dr. Jefferson calmly positioned himself between them, his presence unwavering and his gaze unyielding. This recording was captured during Mr. Peterson's birthday celebration, Kesha explained evenly. There were 43 guests in attendance that evening, including 2 judges, a district attorney, and several prominent businessmen. The conversation was held in the Petersons' library, with the assumption of complete privacy. Mrs. Peterson's face turned pale. We didn't, she stammered, her voice trembling. That was taken completely out of context. The context, Agent Thornfield interjected sharply, was a deliberate conversation aimed at reinforcing the systemic oppression of non-white employees through psychological intimidation and the perpetuation of a hostile work environment. And we possess irrefutable video evidence of the event, courtesy of the Peterson mansion's own meticulously maintained security camera system. William slumped back into his chair, his hands clutching his head in disbelief and despair. His empire, his meticulously polished image, his carefully orchestrated facade of philanthropy, was crumbling before his eyes, reduced to dust by the weight of his own cruelty and arrogance. And to make matters infinitely worse, every agonizing second of his downfall was being meticulously documented by the stunned diners, who had instinctively pulled out their smartphones to record the historic event. Kesha's voice cut through the silence like a finely honed blade, steady, powerful, and utterly unstoppable. The most tragic aspect of this entire situation, Mr. Blackstone, she said, her voice devoid of triumph or vindication, but filled with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had patiently waited years for justice to prevail, and had finally witnessed its arrival, is that for the past 5 years, you have openly humiliated people, perpetuated vile racist jokes, and treated your staff as disposable objects, entirely devoid of human dignity, all while a dedicated civil rights attorney stood directly in front of you, meticulously documenting every single cruel word and every despicable action. She turned to Emma, signing as she spoke aloud. Your daughter is deaf, Mr. Blackstone, not unintelligent. She understood every single thing you said about me, about the other employees, about anyone you considered to be beneath you, and for 5 long years, she remained silent, witnessing me be subjected to constant humiliation, because you had successfully convinced her that she, too, was worthless, that her disability was a mark of shame. Emma suddenly stood up, tears streaming down her cheeks, her body trembling with pent-up emotion. Her hands moved with a speed and fluidity that transcended the limitations of spoken language, conveying a torrent of emotions that words could never fully capture. Kesha translated softly, her own voice wavering ever so slightly. She says that she is deeply ashamed to bear your name, and that she is immensely proud to finally meet someone brave enough to stand up to you, someone who sees her for who she truly is, not for what she lacks. The tears that now welled up in William's eyes were not born of anger or resentment. They were born of something far more profound, something that struck at the very core of his being, something that was ultimately fatal to his pride and his meticulously constructed self-image. He finally realized that in his relentless pursuit of power and wealth, he had squandered everything that truly mattered, his reputation, his empire, and the unwavering love of his only child. Dr. Jefferson began gathering his legal documents, his movements precise and efficient. The formal federal charges will be filed on Monday morning, he said calmly. I strongly advise you to contact your legal counsel immediately. Systemic discrimination, civil rights violations, conspiracy to inflict harm upon employees, and the creation of a hostile work environment, Agent Thornfield stated firmly, her gaze unwavering. The scope of this investigation will now encompass all of your business ventures and partners, Mr. Blackstone. We have reason to believe that the illegal practices employed here at the Golden Crown are widespread throughout your organization. Kesha looked at William one last time. There was no hint of gloating or vindictiveness in her expression, only the quiet, unwavering satisfaction of someone who had dedicated years of her life to seeking justice and had finally witnessed its triumph. Do you know what I learned during these 5 years of serving your tables, Mr. Blackstone? She asked softly. That money can purchase almost anything, with the notable exception of decency, emotional intelligence, or the innate ability to recognize other human beings as equals. As the federal agents escorted a stunned and defeated William Blackstone out of the Golden Crown, the room erupted in a cacophony of flashing cell phone cameras and the hushed murmurs of shocked diners, their whispers carrying on the weight of history being made. One question hung in the air, unspoken yet palpable, a whisper of hope in a world often dominated by greed and injustice. In a world where wealth and power so often serve to shield the cruel and the corrupt, could true justice finally prevail? 6 months later, William Blackstone sat alone in a cramped, sparsely furnished apartment in the borough of Queens, a far cry from the glittering skyscrapers he once owned and the opulent penthouses he once inhabited. His vast empire had crumbled like a house of cards, collapsing under the weight of his own deceit and cruelty. Restaurants were shuttered, hotels were liquidated to pay off mounting federal fines, and his carefully cultivated reputation lay in ruins, so irrevocably tarnished that even taxi drivers refused to grant him rides when they recognized his name. The federal investigation had unearthed decades of systemic discrimination and rampant corruption, far exceeding the initial scope of the investigation. Dozens of former employees, emboldened by Kesha's courageous actions, had come forward with their own harrowing stories of abuse and exploitation, further solidifying the case against him. William now faced 47 separate civil lawsuits, each seeking substantial damages, and a daunting criminal trial that could potentially result in decades behind bars. His former billionaire friends had vanished without a trace, afraid to be associated with his scandal, unwilling to even return his desperate phone calls. Meanwhile, Kesha Williams confidently walked the polished halls of Jefferson and Associates, no longer an undercover waitress, but a full-fledged partner in the prestigious law firm. News outlets across the nation celebrated her 5-year undercover mission, hailing her as a modern-day hero who had single-handedly shattered one of New York City's most powerful and corrupt empires. Her first official case as a partner involved representing Emma Blackstone in a lawsuit to secure her rightful inheritance, the very fortune her father had attempted to withhold out of spite and vindictiveness. Dr. Williams, Emma signed fluently during their weekly meeting, her face radiant with a bright and genuine smile. I never thought I would ever be proud of who I am. For so long, I allowed my father to define me by my deafness, to make me feel like I was somehow broken or incomplete. Now 17, Emma attended an elite boarding school for deaf students, surrounded by a supportive community that celebrated her unique identity and empowered her to embrace her true self. She had discovered her voice through her hands, and the world was finally listening. Her TikTok videos championing deaf pride had garnered millions of views, transforming her into a national voice for young people with disabilities. My father attempted to instill in me a deep sense of shame for being deaf, she signed, her fingers dancing with newfound confidence. You taught me that it is actually my superpower. You helped me to understand that my deafness is not a limitation, but a unique lens through which I experience the world. The Golden Crown, once a symbol of arrogance and unchecked privilege, had been completely transformed under new ownership and progressive management. Following Blackstone's bankruptcy, the restaurant had become a national case study in anti-discrimination reform, a shining example of how to foster a truly inclusive and equitable workplace. Agent Margaret Thornfield, now openly back in her role as an FBI officer, launched a nationwide training program promoting workplace equality and sensitivity, utilizing the story of the Golden Crown as her captivating opening chapter. Inspirational posters lined the walls of the newly renovated restaurant, depicting Kesha receiving various civil rights awards and accolades, serving as a constant reminder that courage and unwavering conviction can rewrite entire systems of oppression. The irony of the entire situation, Kesha later remarked during her compelling interview on 60 Minutes, smiling with genuine warmth, is that William Blackstone mistakenly believed he was humiliating me by forcing me to serve his table for 5 years. But in reality, he unknowingly granted me a front row seat to every single crime he committed. He provided me with all the evidence I needed to dismantle his empire from within. Her laughter was pure and unburdened, devoid of any bitterness or resentment, but filled with a profound sense of peace and accomplishment. It was the kind of laughter that arises from transforming pain into purpose, from channeling suffering into meaningful change. Dr. Jefferson watched proudly from behind the cameras, his heart swelling with admiration for his protege. Kesha had evolved into far more than just a lawyer. She had become a symbol of hope and resilience, irrefutable proof that unwavering persistence and astute intelligence could bring down even the most seemingly untouchable systems of power. The final, poignant twist in the saga occurred on Emma's 18th birthday. Upon gaining complete control of her substantial inheritance, she established the Williams Blackstone Foundation for Deaf Justice, dedicating her family's vast fortune to funding the very programs and initiatives her father had once ridiculed and actively sought to undermine. William watched helplessly from afar as his wealth was used to finance the fight for the very rights he had spent decades attempting to suppress. And in an act of profound symbolic significance that captured national headlines, Emma legally changed her last name to Williams, honoring the woman who had not only saved her life, but had also rescued her soul from the clutches of her father's prejudice and despair. 5 years of waiting tables taught me something invaluable, Kesha later declared in her stirring commencement speech at Gallaudet University, the world's only university designed specifically for deaf and hard-of-hearing students. True wealth is not measured by the amount of money you possess. It is measured by the number of lives you positively impact and the enduring legacy of change you leave behind. William Blackstone never grasped this fundamental truth. He mistakenly equated fear with respect and tyranny with leadership, failing to recognize the inherent dignity and worth of every human being. Now, he lives in isolated obscurity, financially ruined, and socially ostracized, a walking embodiment of the devastating consequences of unchecked greed and unbridled arrogance, a living, breathing reminder that power devoid of humanity is nothing more than a fleeting and ultimately destructive form of tyranny. The inspiring story of a waitress who served justice alongside dinner serves as a testament to one timeless truth. The greatest form of revenge is not to destroy your oppressors, but to construct something so meaningful and enduring that they are ultimately forced to confront what they forfeited by choosing hatred and oppression over compassion and empathy. If this narrative touched your heart and reignited your faith in the power of justice, subscribe for more stories that unequivocally demonstrate that human dignity will always prevail, even when the odds appear insurmountable.